Hey everybody, hope you're doing okay. What I've got here is what, in my opinion, is probably one of the coolest pieces of O-scale maintenance of way equipment ever made. This is the MTH Weed Sprayer Set, and we're going to check it out right now on Eric's Trains. Alright, so if you've ever spent any time around railroad tracks, you may have noticed that sections of track that are in active use by the railroad, sections of track that are in revenue service, usually look relatively clean. There's not a lot of weeds and stray plants growing between the rails or on either side. Whereas if you look over at an abandoned section of track that hasn't been used in a few years, you'll see lots of weeds and plants growing all over the place. Why is that? Well, it's because the railroads work to keep the revenue service right-of-way free from weeds and debris. And they do that by using a giant weed spraying machine. It's just like when you go out in your front yard with a bottle of Roundup and you spray those pesky weeds that are in the cracks and crevices to kill them. The railroads are basically using a giant bottle of Roundup and a big motorized sprayer to spray it all between the rails and on either sides, and also around switches and around other pieces of important equipment. And it's important for them to do this, well, for a couple reasons. First of all, it's not a good image to have your track look like trash. And secondly, if they let the weeds and plants get out of control, it could interfere with the operation of the switches and other equipment, and it could, in extreme cases, even derail a train. Now, it's no secret that I like strange and weird and unusual trains. The weirder it is, the more I like it and the more I want it. And I think this qualifies as one of the weirder railroad accessories that I have in my collection. So this is model number 20-2251-1, and it was originally delivered in July of 2000, so 22 years ago. To give you an idea of how old that is, when this model was delivered, I was not yet back in the hobby. I had 0 trains in my house. Now, MTH only made this model twice. The original run was in 2000, and then I believe they did another run around 2003, and that was it. They never made it again. I guess it didn't sell well or something, and this is something that I've wanted for a very long time, but I had held out because I was hoping that MTH would make these things again, and I'd be able to get one brand new with Proto-Sound 3 instead of Proto-Sound 2, but that never happened, and I have no reason to believe that it ever will in the near future. I was kind of hoping that maybe when MTH sold off some of their tooling a couple years ago, Lionel bought the tooling for this model, but I don't think they did. I'm slowly coming to terms with the possibility that Lionel didn't buy any of the tooling that I was really hoping they would buy, like the triplex and the weed sprayer set here and a few other things. Anyway, MTH did this in several different road names. They did 2 Union Pacific versions. There's the green one that you see here, and they also did one that was white, I believe. They did a black Norfolk Southern version. I'd like to get one of those one of these days. They did a C&O, they did a really cool orange Amtrak version, and then they also did Northern Pacific. And MTH offered these in both powered and non-powered versions. And yes, this is a powered set, believe it or not. A lot of people, when they first see this, they think, oh, that's a nice piece of rolling stock you've got there, but it is a powered set. Yeah, you've got the 2 tank cars behind the lead unit, but the lead unit is, for all intents and purposes, a locomotive. In fact, the only thing it doesn't have that a standard locomotive would have is a fan-driven smoke unit. Other than that, it is essentially a locomotive that can pull cars behind it, which is really cool. Now, back when these were brand new, the retail price for one of these powered units was right at $380, which oddly enough is about what you'll pay today if you can find one. Anytime I've seen one of these pop up on eBay, if it's in good condition, it'll usually go for between $325 and $400. I paid about $360 for this one. So since this thing was made in 2000, it does have Proto-Sound 2 on board, rather than Proto-Sound 3, and that's okay by me because feature-wise there is no difference between PS2 and PS3. PS3 is just a more modern electronics package that most importantly eliminates the need for the rechargeable NiCad batteries that you find in the older PS2 locomotives. And on that topic, when I bought this on eBay, I thought, okay, it's 22 years old, there's a chance that old NiCad battery has gone bad, So to prepare for that, when I bought this, I also bought this on eBay as well. This is one of those battery component replacements. This one's made by J&W Electronics, and I think it cost about 30 bucks. And this takes the place of a bad NiCad battery in these old PS2 locomotives. This is not actually a battery, it's a capacitor of some sort, and it does a good job of replacing those old NiCad batteries. But when I got this out of the box and put it on the track, everything worked perfectly. The old 22-year-old battery is still in perfect working order. So I'll save this for a rainy day when I actually do need to replace a bad battery on one of my PS2 locomotives. Taking a closer look, here's one of the two tank cars, and this is just a typical MTH tank car, nothing too fancy. Classic MTH quality, all die-cast metal on the trucks and couplers. I think it's got a die-cast metal frame as well, which is pretty cool. So let's measure this thing. Lengthwise, it comes in at just a hair over 9 inches. And let's see what one of these cars weighs. Looks like 14.7 ounces. In my opinion, a good piece of O-scale rolling stock should usually weigh in between 14 and 16 ounces. So this one is right on the money, but yeah, it looks great. And then we've got the lead unit, which by the way is absolutely gorgeous. Now I'm no expert on the real railroad weed sprayers, but I've seen some pictures of them and this looks like a reasonable facsimile. You can see that it's meant to look like it was made from an old boxcar, which these things were. It's an old outside braced boxcar. You know, when the railroad needs a piece of MOW equipment, they usually make them from old pieces of rolling stock like boxcars and cabooses, and that's what they would do here. Got a door on each side and this little cupola window up here, which is kind of cool. And then there's the cab. There's one guy in the cab, and what's kind of funny is that if you look closely, I'm not sure if you can see it, but he's got a cup of coffee in his hand. So having a cup of joe and spraying some weeds. Not a bad way to earn a day's pay. As you can see, this thing is just great. This front just looks so cool. The safety striping, headlight, operating marker lights, and a flashing warning beacon. And then we've got the main spray jets that spray the weed killer on either side of the tracks. And I would think there was also a way to manually target patches of weeds. Maybe on the top they came out of these hatches and grabbed these hoses or something, I don't know. But you'll hear in the crew talk later on where the crew talks about, hey, get that patch of weeds over on that switch. So I'm sure there was a way to manually target patches of weeds. You can see on the back, on this deck, they've got all these valves and pipes and so forth. I imagine these fed the weed sprayer that was coming from the tank cars that drags behind this thing. And a little motor there to power the pump, I'm sure. There's a smokestack, but like I said, this does not have a fan-driven smoke unit. On the underside, there's the speaker, master volume control, and what's cool is that it actually has a charge port for the rechargeable NiCad battery. You don't see that on many old PS2 locomotives, but this has it. Now there's only one motor in this thing obviously because there's no space for a motor above this truck. So there's a motor above this truck, all wheels are driven, and there's 2 traction tires on these back wheels. And then on this truck, all the wheels are just free spinning. Now one weakness of these old PS2 locomotives was that they had 1 pickup roller per truck rather than 2. And that meant that you didn't have as much center rail connectivity, and so if you went through some back-to-back switches or over some dirty track, there was a greater chance of losing connectivity and the engine stalling. And that was corrected later on, and MTH started putting 2 pickup rollers per truck on all their modern locomotives, but this one has 1 per truck. I haven't had any problems with it so far, but it could happen when you just had 1 per truck. It's got a nice reassuring weight to it because it's got die-cast metal trucks and couplers, a die-cast metal fuel tank, and then a sheet metal frame. So let's see how much this thing weighs. It's got to be 3 or 4 pounds. Let's see. 3 pounds, 8.4 ounces. So yeah, right at 3.5 pounds. And it definitely feels like it. Very nice. And we'll go ahead and get the length. Get my little tape measure out here. And it comes in at right around 12 3/4 inches. And according to the MTH website, the minimum curve for this thing was 0.54. Now, by far, the coolest feature of this set is the PFA sequence, the passenger freight announcement sequence, because it's unique. I've never seen a PFA sequence like the one on this locomotive. With every other MTH locomotive I've ever seen, when you activate the PFA sequence, the locomotive comes to a stop, and then it plays all the crew chat sounds, and then it resumes operation, it starts moving and rings the bell, because that's the prototypical way to do the PFA sequence. This one doesn't work that way because that wouldn't be realistic, because if you're spraying weeds, obviously you can't be standing still, you have to be moving. So this is the only MTH locomotive that I've ever seen where when you activate the PFA sequence, it keeps moving, which is pretty cool. So now we'll power this thing up and check out some of the features and sounds and then take it for a spin around the layout. One of the things I want to do is try to see how many cars this single motored lead unit can pull. Obviously it's not going to pull as many as a dual motored engine, but I wouldn't be surprised if it can pull 10 or 12 cars, no problem, maybe more. We'll have to find out. Okay, let's fire it up, and just for fun, I'm going to use the extended startup sequence.
Morning, guys. Ready to get into oil? We're out. Make sure we got plenty of weed going. Tanks are full. Okay, hop on the compressor. Everybody's good. Okay, let's get this thing fired up.
Okay, this thing's pretty loud, so let me turn it down for just a second so I can talk. And I'll dim the room lights real quick as well. So as you can see, it looks great up here. We've got a light on the interior of the cab. There's also a light in this window back here. Then we've got that flashing red beacon. We've got 5 red marker lights, or whatever those are called. And then there's the headlight. And although there is no light on the back of the lead unit, when you change direction, that headlight does turn off. All right, let's turn the volume back up and we'll check out the horn and bell. So here's the horn. And one thing that's always been nice about MTH is they have buttons for the reverse horn sound and the forward horn sound. So here's forward and reverse. And here's the bell. And of course, this thing has some really cool crew talk sounds, but I'll save that for the PFA sequence in just a moment. Okay, let's roll it out.
compressor. we go. Make sure it don't get up through around the switch motor. Okay. Get that packed over there by the propane tank. I'm on it. Looks like a bunch of rail fans in here. They better stand back or they're going to get a little wet. I'll give them a little blast from the horn and give them a warning. How's it look from up there? Looks like we hit everything. Okay, shut down the sprayers.
Okay, the last thing I want to do is see just how many cars this single-motored locomotive, if you will, can pull. So it comes with the 2 tank cars, but I've added 10 random freight cars, including a caboose, so we've got a total of 12 freight cars, and we'll see how it does and then go from there. And I've painted a couple yellow dots on the drive wheel here, just so I can better gauge whether or not it's slipping as it pulls. So let's give it a whirl. Looks pretty good with 12. The little yellow dots are coming around at regular intervals on the drive wheel, so I don't see any slippage. Yeah, it's doing just fine. Okay, so it made it around the loop in one piece, but as I was adding some more freight cars for this thing to pull, I noticed that one of the traction tires had come off. So that tells me that pulling 12 cars is making it rely on those traction tires a lot more than it did when it was pulling 2. And that's okay, except for the fact that these are the original traction tires and they are 22 years old, so they're probably not in the best shape. So I want to give this thing a fair chance. I went ahead and I changed the traction tires. It's got brand new traction tires. And by the way, when I took the old traction tires off, they pulled apart very easily, so clearly they were not in the best shape. So we've got new traction tires. I've also added 6 more cars, so we're up to 18 freight cars now. Let's see how it does. All right, pulling 18. I don't see any slippage yet. It seems pretty smooth. Hopefully those new traction tires are doing their job. It'll be interesting to see what condition the traction tires are in when it comes back around. But so far so good on 18 cars. So the traction tires look to be in good shape, so I think that did the trick. This thing will pull 12 or 18 cars, assuming you've got nice fresh traction tires. I've added 6 more cars, so now we've got 24 cars total. Let's see how it does. A little bit of hesitation there at the start, but now it's going. Probably not super happy about 24 cars, but it is doing it. There was just a second of hesitation at the start, but now it's cruising pretty good. And by the way, this is just for fun. You would never pull 24 cars behind a weed sprayer set. There'd be no reason to do that. And the cars you're seeing, they're just random cars that I had within arm's reach. There's no standardization to the cars. They're just random freight cars, but I figured that was a way to give a good average. Obviously, the number of cars that you can pull is going to depend on the number, the size, and the weight. Yeah, we are cruising with 24 cars. Okay, the traction tires still look okay. I've added 6 more cars, including a Lionel 21-inch passenger car. So we're up to 30 cars now. I think we're starting to push the upper limits of this thing, but we'll see how it does. And I can only add maybe 12 more cars before the front of the train hits the back of the train. So hopefully we'll find out soon. Let's see how it does with 30 cars. Ooh. More of a hesitation, but it's still doing it. Good thing we're not on a grade. It's amazing what one motor will pull. Traction tires make a big difference. If it wasn't for those traction tires, this would have been over long ago. Okay, that was pretty funny. The coupler on this car obviously can't handle 30 cars behind it, but the tank car and the locomotive can. Let's see how she does going in reverse. 30 cars. Oh yeah. Those wheels are starting to spin, so in reverse, we have hit the limit. Yeah, these wheels are slipping big time trying to push 30 cars. And by the way, I did try a push of 24 cars. I didn't show it, but I tried it, and it pushed 24 cars fine. But 30 cars, obviously it's having a problem pushing 30 cars. So it can still pull 30 cars, but it can't push 30 cars. So for all intents and purposes, I would say we've reached the limit, and probably the maximum safe number of cars you can pull and push with this thing is going to be somewhere between 24 and 30. I really wouldn't take it much past 24. Heck, I wouldn't take it much past 2, but hey, we're just having some fun here. Anyway, it can still pull the 30 cars, so I'm just curious at what point it won't be able to pull anymore. So I'm going to add 6 more cars, bringing the total up to 36 cars. Okay, here we go, 36 cars. I will be shocked if it's able to pull this consistently. Let's see. Oh, it's struggling, but yeah, it's doing it. No way it's going to be able to push 36, but it can still pull it. Wow. We've surpassed the bounds of reasonable pulling power, and we're now in the ridiculous zone. All right, we are now at 44 cars, and by the way, if I zoom out a little bit, this is the other end of the train. So we've reached a maximum test capacity at 44 cars. Let's see how it does. Oh. It's doing it. The lead unit is about 2 inches behind the caboose. Okay, the wheels are slipping a little bit. I can hear them slipping, but it is pulling. Okay, I just want you guys to see this. Here comes the caboose, and about 1 inch behind it is the lead unit. All right, so it pulled 40 cars. I wouldn't recommend doing that. As I said before, probably the reasonable limit would be around 24 cars. Probably less if you ask me, but again, it's completely silly since it's a weed sprayer set. Traction tires look okay, although I did hear some wheel slip, so there you go. Now, in my videos, you often hear me talk about the pulling power of a locomotive. I tested the pulling power of this lead unit off screen, and it produced 1 pound, 10 ounces of pulling power. So now you have an idea of how many cars we're talking about when I state the pulling power. So 1 pound, 10 ounces, you can probably expect it to pull around 24 cars safely, maybe a few more. I wouldn't push it to 24. If I had 1 pound, 10 ounces, I'd probably keep it around 18 cars or something like that. And of course, if it's got 2 pounds, 10 ounces, or 3 pounds, or 4 pounds, it's going to be able to pull a ton of cars. All right, that was kind of fun. Now, the last thing I want to say is that because the weed sprayer lead unit is an MTH locomotive, if you really want to pull a whole bunch of cars with this thing, you can do what the real railroads do and create a multi-unit consist. And you can keep adding locomotives and pull however many cars you want. Anyway, that's going to do it for now. If you'd like to support this channel, I would greatly appreciate it. That can be done through Patreon at patreon.com/ericstrains. I'll also put a link to my Patreon channel in the description below and in the video. Patreon supporters get access to all sorts of perks and benefits, and you can read about those benefits on my Patreon page. And finally, if you'd like to buy an Eric's Trains t-shirt or anything else that might be selling, check out the Eric's Trains online store at ericstrains.com/store. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Eric Siegel, and I'll see you next time.